Hi, I'm Michael Goodfriend, and I'm the executive producer of In the Cards.
And I am Kevin Henderson, the writer-director of In the Cards.
Kevin, we have Steve Boyer. I'm going to call him Steven.
Okay.
Because that's his professional name. Steven Boyer. Don't talk yet, Steve. All right. You're a New York City-based actor who has starred in numerous shows on and off Broadway. You're right now in Kimberly Akimbo, which won Tony Awards. I don't know exactly what for, although I know Bonnie Milligan got one. You have gotten nominated for Tony Awards for Kimberly Akimbo and other things. You have lots of television credits, and you have tons of theater credits. And now you have a second podcast credit thanks to Next Chapter Podcasts. Let me give us a pat on the back for that. You are a great star in our universe, and it is an absolute joy to have you, especially after your incredible performance in the Cards as Lex. Welcome to the bonus content series for In the Cards, Steve.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I feel like I just learned so much about myself. You're like, you have been nominated. I'm like, I have. It's incredible.
And he's done other podcasts other than these two. I listened.
Have I? I mean, I don't know.
Haven't you? Didn't your wife write a play or something? And yeah, I think you have with Lithgow. And
did you know that your wife wrote a play?
Yes. You know, I did do. Yes, my wife wrote a radio play for what's that series? The Playing on Air.
That's not a podcast, Kevin. That's a radio play.
There you go. It's a radio play.
I heard it as a podcast. So
okay, as Lex, you're an ad man, right? You're it's a dreary job. You're putting together these table tents, which is brilliant. Kevin's brilliant idea there. What's the worst survival job or most tedious survival job you've ever had?
Oh, I've been very fortunate lately to make ends meet just through performing, which is great.
That's a huge feat.
I feel like that as like a benchmark of success for an actor. I feel like that's all we're looking for. You know, it's like if we can just do this and pay our rent, then that's it. We've made it. That is success. But before that, I did a bunch of things. I mean, I was a singing and dancing waiter at Johnny Rockets. I worked at the Atlantic Philanthropies as a receptionist, but I got fired for being too political because they're supposed to be not political there. I was like unemployed as an actor for about a decade. I had very few jobs as an actor, and I started going crazy, and I did stand up for a while because I just needed an outlet, and I needed the audience to tell me that I was okay. So I started doing stand-up for a while. I toured around with another comedian, and
as a performer, I think that that stand-up is the scariest.
There's a lot of books about how to write material, and whenever I'm trying to learn a new thing, I'm like, let's go to the books, and I really studied about how to write jokes for yourself, and once I started doing it and I had like a nice solid set, I knew enough to slip the new jokes, the new untested material in between two jokes that I knew worked.
Right.
So I didn't feel too bad about myself.
And were you and what sort of comedian were you? Were you like a storytelling kind of guy or?
Yeah, I mean, I did it for a very short period of time. It was mostly it was some observational, but it was mostly like me. It was just like my story, my point of view. And like me in real life, like in the storytelling and in the things that I would talk about, I would end up just sort of like impersonating people in those stories because that's just how I communicate in life. I mean, when I tell a story about my family, I'm going to do an impression of every member of my family.
Sure.
Did you know like that comedy was a strong suit of yours where people always like, oh, you're so funny. You should get comedy.
Yeah. I mean, like I was like a class clown as a kid and just I remember, you know, like in elementary school, like being over at friends' houses and like there was a power outage and I just basically like riffed for hours and cracked up this kid's family.
They're like, oh no, Steve's coming over again today.
Yeah,
Everybody,
I'd like go on, you know, I was in Boy Scouts. I'd go on a camp out and I would literally stand at the campfire while all the other kids just sat around and I would talk for hours and just crack them up.
Funny.
Have you ever actually been an actual clown, like gotten in the clown suit and the whole thing?
Not in the clown suit. It's not like I'm, you know, Pennywise from It, but I do hang out in sewers. So we're very similar. No, but I did some clown stuff. You know, you can't go to drama school and not do some clown stuff.
Right. You went to Juilliard.
I went to Juilliard. They're all about clown stuff.
The best of all the clown schools.
Oh yes, the most highly trained clowns.
So you come from somewhere in Ohio, correct?
Yeah, I come from a suburb of Columbus called Westerville.
How does a young guy from the outskirts of the metropolis of Columbus, Ohio, find Juilliard?
There's actually a lot of community theaters and children's theaters in and around Columbus. If you know the show How I Met Your Mother, the lead in that show, Josh Radnor, also grew up outside of Columbus. We did community theater together as kids.
Right.
There were a lot of opportunities to get on stage. And, you know, I was like a super hyper child. I think my parents were just like, get him on the stage, take him away.
Right.
And I really like funneled my energy into acting and really comedy. I mean, it was really mostly comedic acting at that point. And I sing, and I do accents. So they were like, hey, there's this little kid who can do a bunch of accents and can sing and has the comic timing of, you know, a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Right.
So let's use him. And I ended up being booked and busy from like the age of 10 on.
That's wild.
In Columbus. And so I was in a show or two at a time for years.
Wow.
Like throughout my teen years and even before.
Right.
And but I'd heard of Juilliard. I did not know until it was a guidance counselor who was like, so are you like, is this serious, or like, she's like, get serious with me. Like, are you good?
Right.
Or are you, you know? And I was like, I think I'm pretty good. And she's like, then you should apply to Juilliard. I thought Juilliard was in Europe.
Well, good for her because I mean, I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't even think I ever spoke I don't even know if they had guidance counselors at my.
I applied to like over a dozen programs because I was scared that I wasn't going to get into any of them.
Sure.
And I was very chill at my Juilliard audition because I'm like, this is just practice for the other ones that I'm sure I have a better shot at.
Right.
And then I was so relaxed that I got in.
Wow. And did you go to New York for that, or were they?
No, I auditioned in Chicago for that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I remember those. You go to that
a hotel,
big building. Yeah, the Palmer House.
Yes. Right? Yes.
Palmer House.
And you audition for like 5 or 6 schools all at once. You know, like I mean, in different rooms, but like on the same day.
Okay. Right, and then some people see like, did you get called back? Like,
Juilliard had a callback. It was the only one that had a callback. It was actually more of a culture shock. I felt kind of ready to go to New York and like go live in the city, right?
Right.
And it was more of a culture shock after I had gone to New York, gone to Juilliard, and then I would come back home for holidays. I'd walk around the mall and I'd be like, everybody is really fat and really white.
And they like, walk really
I didn't
slowly.
notice before. Everybody here is really, really big and really white. So that was a culture shock. I'm like, I had no idea.
And how did you get from graduating to doing Hand of God with my good friend Geneva Carr?
It took some time. When I graduated, the first thing I did, the first job I had was on Broadway at the Booth Theater. It was a revival of I'm Not Rappaport with Judd Hirsch and Ben Vereen. And I had one scene at the end of Act 1 where I came on with a knife. I was a Central Park mugger in the 80s, and I mugged these guys at knife point. I knocked Judd Hirsch out. I took Ben Vereen's money, and I ran off stage. And then I just played video games backstage for all of Act 2.
Oh my God.
I was like, hey,
what
this
a
is my first
dream
out of
job.
school. It's Broadway. This shit's gonna be easy. And then I spent the next 10 years like maxing out credit cards, and I couldn't get hired to save my life. I did a smattering of regional shows. Mostly I got hired. I play a lot of instruments, and I got hired when they needed an actor musician.
Right.
They're like, do you play accordion or do you play ukulele? And I'm like, I will learn for this audition.
Right.
And then I ended up doing a lot of actor musician tracks in things.
That's a great skill to have, right?
You hadn't been a musician, like you hadn't been a musician prior to that?
No, I played piano and guitar, but then I ended up, sometimes they'd be like, we need a piano player or a guitar player. But then when there's a weird instrument, I'd be like, well, I'll figure it out.
Right.
I'll figure it out.
That's great. Well, I mean, having a foundation.
Hurdy-gurdy in a show for 6 months.
Like knowing the piano gives you that foundation for all those other instruments.
Absolutely. I learned piano, and then I had a guitar, and I was able to teach myself guitar with a chord chart and the piano music that I was able to read.
Right.
And everything, knowing those two instruments really translated into learning a lot. Basically any fretted instrument, any instrument with a keyboard, you're going to be able to learn if you know piano and guitar.
And you're in a band, right? You're in an actual band.
I'm in a band with a bunch of other actors.
Right. One of them is Will Jackson Harper. I know that.
William Jackson Harper is our drummer. Bobby Moreno plays rhythm guitar.
Bobby Moreno, who played Henry V for us
right.
Play on podcast, and you were Pistol, and you were brilliant.
Yeah, Jeff Beals on bass.
Oh yeah, also in Henry V.
And Diana O and Sean Randall are our vocalists and also on synths. We're called the US Open.
Right. How did you get
our album on Spotify?
Tell us how you got to that as the name of the band.
Oh, it was, you know what? We had very weird names for a while. We were just called like the House Band, and then one gig we were called the What. We had no name. People were like, "What are you called?" And we're like, "I don't know." And then after a gig, we were at a bar, and it was actually William Jackson Harper and I were joking about another band, this indie rock band called Tennis. And we were like, that's a ridiculous name. And they're like, yeah, we should call ourselves Wimbledon, or the Australian Open. And then we were like, the US Open. And we were like, US Open. And we kind of liked the connotations of that name. Like, it is, there's a US Open for all sorts of things, so why not for music? And it's like, it says like it's the best of the best, but also we have we have songs that are kind of political and about like it was during the Trump years, so this idea of like just the phrase the US Opens was kind of like a fuck you to the anti-immigrant sentiments of the administration and things. But it has nothing to do with tennis or golf. So it was just, it made people smile.
Was the thing started to turn for you in a good way, thanks to music, thanks to being an actor musician, right? I mean, what was the actual turn where you were like, oh, I don't need another job anymore?
It was I started I wanted to stay in town because I'd been doing all these regional things. So I stayed in town by I stayed in New York City by kind of like planting roots at this place, Ensemble Studio Theater in Hell's Kitchen, EST. And EST is a developmental theater where playwrights and directors and actors get together and do readings and workshops and really develop new work together, and in in a very collaborative process. And that's always what I wanted to do. I wanted to originate characters. I didn't want to do revivals necessarily, or traditional shows that people had seen. I wanted to be the first to. I wanted to put my stamp on something, and that's what you did at EST. And it didn't really pay any money, but you're thinking, maybe one of these plays will hit, and one of them did, and it was Hand to God.
Oh, okay.
Which started, we did like 8 or 9 workshops or readings. We did tons of readings over the course of years, and then finally, EST was like, these readings are getting such a good response. We're going to make some room in our schedule, in our season, and just kind of shoehorn it in. And then it got extended like 3 times, and it became the season. All these money people showed up. It eventually moved to an off-Broadway theater down at the Lucille Lortel. And then a year after that, moved to the Booth, and had a Broadway run for about a year, and was nominated for all kinds of Tonys.
Right.
And it was this weird, like psychotic, hilarious horror movie of a play with blood and devil possessed puppets and sex fights, and just like it was filthy and hilarious, and somehow it made it to Broadway, which is insane. I mean,
you have a turn.
Not
you had
the
a
kind
turn,
of show that you would expect.
You do something with those puppets, as I recall.
Oh yeah, there's a really graphic sex scene where the puppets are banging in many positions, while the people that are, because the puppets have a mind of their own in this show. They are their own. They have their own brain. They're, people's hands are possessed, and so the people that have their hands in the puppets are having a scene, a very serious heart-to-heart scene, while in front of them these puppets are just going at it, which includes the final act. I mean, it's they go all the way. They finish.
So this, combined with Avenue Q, folks, kids out there listening, if you want to get to Broadway, fuck puppets. Fuck puppets.
Yes, please.
Is your path to Broadway.
That's it. Yeah, really. It's people love it.
So that happened, and things really turned around. I mean, things.
That's when things really turned around. Yes.
Right. Well, going back to your EST thing, that's sort of how that connection came to us. Because you had worked with our sound designer Shane Reddig.
Oh yes.
And when I first started, when I first conceived of doing this as a project, my first call was to Shane, who I went to school. He went to Yale School of Drama as well, and I said, "Look, I've got this idea to do, like an old radio play type of deal. These types of entertainments are becoming popular. I think we could do this for pretty cheap, just you and me, and in somebody's closet studio or something." And he's like, "I love that idea. All right." I said, "Look, I'm gonna bang out a couple episodes. I'll send them to your way, and then we'll see if we both think this is a good idea." Anyway, so fast forward, I had written about between 2 and 4 of them, and he said, "Who are you thinking about for parts?" And I was writing. I wrote the Bella role for Lila because she was somebody in my. I wrote Robert the waiter. I wrote for Michael Goodfriend. He was the one who was always in my mind. And but Lex was a bit of a challenge. I was like, I have no idea, because this role to me was the biggest. That was the trickiest role. I thought that was the role that could really screw up the whole the whole podcast, because he's so out there. But if it's not, if his manic energy doesn't come from a place of believability and honesty, then it's going to turn into a cartoon, and it's not going to be something that I want it to be, which is more than that. So Shane was like, I know the perfect guy.
He's like, I know a guy who's crazy.
He's nuts.
I know a guy who fucks puppets, makes puppets fuck.
Listen, I saw him fuck a puppet on Broadway.
So anyway, I started to Google you, and so I started. I hadn't seen Hand of God. I wish I had, but I had seen a bunch of clips, and then I was watching some of your clips, the other stuff that you had done, and I was like, yeah, let's. You think you'd be interested? And so we approached you pretty early, like way back, and it took several years for the project to actually go, but you had given at least sort of a soft commitment to be like, oh yeah, okay. So anyway, I started to really write towards what I thought your voice would be in this thing, and you certainly did not disappoint.
I mean, I think you nailed it. It fit like a glove.
Like a puppet. It got to the point where I would hear the initial mixes would come in, and before you even really had a line out, I'd be laughing at you. Yeah. You just one word, and I'd be like, he's scared.
Yeah, you really cracked us up there. So, and the other funny, I always wonder, why does an actor say yes to something? Now, it's not like this was 12 years ago where you were just doing anything, any sort of project. You're a very busy guy. You're on Broadway while we were going into production on this thing. I'm like, we're gonna lose him, he's gonna be too busy. So why does an actor say yes to a project that you really only read the first episode of, and with people who you only know tangentially through Shane, who I don't think you guys are like best friends or anything, have a working relationship? So why does Stephen Boyer say yes to this little project?
You don't have to say that it was because of the writing. I'm just letting you know this right now.
The answer is because of the writing.
It was the writing.
Okay. So the writing in one episode, there were 8. The writing could have fallen off.
The writing in all of them. You know what? I mean, I had done Henry V before.
That hack.
Henry IV. Henry IV? No, Henry V. Sorry,
Henry V.
So I did Henry V, the Henry V podcast, and it was relatively easy and painless. I'm like, I can act with like good people from my home. That was in the early days of the pandemic. Like it was, I was kind of like hungry for a performance opportunity.
Right.
And the cast that was assembled for Henry V, great people. And I'm like, I get like a little taste of acting with these people who I really like their work and admire. And that was like a really good experience. And so then this opportunity came along, and I read the first episode, and I'm like, well, this is funny. And this character, I'm like, I've got this character in my back pocket. Like, this is not going to be like a heavy lift for me. And it's going to be fun because he had like all the great jokes.
He did.
So, and I kind of knew what the recording experience was like from before. And so I'm like, this, the opportunity to be this character in this story seems like a lot of fun. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be like so grueling.
Right.
It was relatively easy breezy.
Oh, okay. You hear that, Kevin? You hear that? It wasn't the writing. It was me. I got him into Henry V, and the rest that was it. He's like, I work with Michael Goodfriend again? Absolutely.
I do remember you saying, like, on the 3rd or 4th day of recording, you're like, boy, this role's kind of big. I didn't expect I'd have to be here this
really
much. Yeah.
Well, but then also, Steve, like, your agent was like, he has to be able to work from home. He only wants to work from home. He's only going to do it from home. I'm like, whatever, fine, fine. But then you were in the studio the whole time. I was like, I guess
Yeah, you know why?
I got away from that kid.
Because I mean, I have 2 kids now.
Yeah.
And but when I was recording this, I only had one. But he, kids are changing all the time, and his newest thing was just being a hyperactive, crazy ball of energy running around. And I'm like, there is no way I can do this at home. I have to go in.
Oh.
I mean, I do like Lila. The cast assembled for this is just it's a lot of heavy hitters.
Yeah, we were very, very fortunate, for sure. And like I said to Michael from the beginning, and I've said this to other people, like I wanted to, this was going to be something that really had no rehearsal. We just did a read through.
Right.
I didn't want a bunch of, difficult personalities. I wanted things to be really tight. I wanted to have a connection, even if it wasn't firsthand, to each person in it, secondhand. So, Shane was like, yeah, this guy's great. So to me, I considered you family. Jamie Ann, I didn't know her, but Michael worked with her a bunch, and Lila I knew, of course. And, even the other roles, like,
well, we didn't know about Connor. We didn't know how that was
Connor was the big wild card, because he was the only one who was completely outside of the family. Connor perfect. And I knew a couple people from the commercial route, but other than that, I didn't really know him, so that was tricky. But you and Connor, your energy together,
chemistry is amazing.
Yeah, it was fun.
It felt like you guys were just like immediate pals.
I mean, some people play ball.
Yeah,
and he's there to play ball. Like you give him something and he takes it and gives it back, and like that's what you want in every situation as an actor.
And that is literally the phrase that I used with Michael. I said, I want people who are going to play ball.
Oh,
yeah. And yeah. Well, that was, I mean, you guys, your energy together was just fantastic.
Can we get back to survival jobs and clowns and such like?
Sure.
Kevin, have you ever been a clown for money?
I've been a clown in a couple shows, and then our classmate Susie Stevens and I, we dressed up in some fuzzy, like, full character outfits, and we got roped into doing something in Columbus Circle and dancing around. And
I think I remember.
She's like, my costume seems heavy. I'm like, all right, I'll take your costume and you can take my costume. Then I realized that, my costume was the man costume and her costume was the female costume. So I was a cross-dressing frog and or something like that. So that was the worst one I did.
Any other survival jobs that you remember?
I did have a this one is particularly weird. There was a job when I found out through some of my friends in the stand-up world, because they always had very weird survival jobs. They were like, yeah, so Clear Channel owns a bunch of radio stations all across the country, and on all of their morning shows, they do these weird things where they're called War of the Roses, where they try and catch someone cheating on their partner by being like, okay, we're gonna call up Mitch and we're gonna offer Mitch a dozen roses and he can send it to whoever he wants. And we're on the phone with Angela. Angela, you think Mitch is cheating? We're gonna see if Mitch sends them to Angela or someone else. And the people on the phone, the people who are playing the Mitch and Angela characters or whoever, are actors.
Oh no!
Oh, I love this.
Yes, and so I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning to do morning radio. I would call into a station in South Carolina, and I'd be like, "Hello, hi," and they're like, "Okay, all right, Steve. We also got Emily over here on the line," and she'd be like, "Hi," and they're like, "Okay, you two are gonna fight. We can't curse because we're gonna be live on the air, but okay, you're gonna be Mitch, and you're gonna be." It's And so I would have to get up and I would have to whisper to my sleeping wife. I'd be like, hey, I'm going to go in the next room and scream at someone right now. So just try and sleep. And I'd be in the next room being like, you bitch, you ruined my life. How could you do this to me? He's my best friend. And she'd be like, you never pay attention to me. How am I supposed to feel? And they'd be like, whoa, boy, this War of the Roses was one for the history books. And I would make $50 a pop, for whatever. And so, sometimes I would do 2 of them. And
how
I'd
do
be
you
like,
get a job like that?
I made $100 before 9 a.m.
Like, how did you find out about the job? Did somebody be like, dude, there's this
another comedian, another stand-up was like,
perfect.
They need people that can improvise. I'm like, great, okay.
And did you know whoever Emily or Angela was?
No, you never met these people. And I'm like, I don't know who this person is, but I'm going to say terrible things to them at an ungodly hour of morning. But I would try to turn it into, because I was like an unemployed actor, I was trying to turn it into like an exercise. Like I'd be like, oh, well, this radio station is in Louisiana, and I would like go online and I go to like the International Dialects of English archive, and I'd be like, let me work on my Louisiana dialect.
I'm a fan secure.
Do this. So I'd be like, you ruined my life, Angela. I swear. That would just sound like Foghorn Leghorn. I'll see.
Oh man, that must have told so many people that you were fake. Like,
yeah, right.
That guy's not from here.
Sometimes I would just try and match the guy's accent. Like,
who was calling you? Yeah.
The host would be like, all right, we're gonna do War of the Roses, and who do we have online? I'm like, it's me, Hank. And I would just like try and do them. I'd be like, yep, no, she is cheating on me, sure as shit. we gotta catch her.
Did you ever get copies of these things or no?
No. And they were like, don't tell anyone.
Right. Burn after reading. Like burn after hearing.
Right. Next time I'm in Biloxi, I'll make sure I keep my mouth
I have
shut.
told this
like
story
cinema secrets
many, many times. Like people have to know. I think they used to be real.
Yeah.
And then they got sued.
Oh.
And they were like, well, people love it. Let's keep doing it.
It's probably also a lot less work for them to do it with actors, right?
Oh,
right.
yeah, a lot less to worry about. It's probably actually funnier, right?
Yeah.
When you get right down to it. So how about psychics? What's your history in dabbling with the occult?
I went to a psychic one time with an ex-girlfriend, and she really wanted to go. And I'm like, okay, we'll both get our stuff read. I think it was tarot cards. And all I remember is that she told me, she was like, you will be with the love of your life, and she will have an S in her name. And my girlfriend at the time, no S in her name. And but my wife now, S in her name.
Really?
So, oh.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
But I mean, that's really, I mean, look, S is a pretty common letter.
I know.
She's going to have a vowel in her name.
Yes. And a consonant. There will be a consonant and a vowel in the first and.
So when you met your wife and she had an S in her name, were you like, this must be it?
No, because so many people have an S in their name.
A nice S. Did she have a nice S?
Oh, yes. Very nice.
That's it? Just one and done?
That's it. I mean, I don't.
You don't read your horoscope.
I'm not so into magical thinking.
As I told Michael in a previous podcast, you can go back and research which one I did. I have never been to a psychic. It freaked me out too much. But I remember when I was a little boy, my mother used to run a dance studio, and the person who taught her was, you know, a legend in our town, and she actually she choreographed at the college that I ended up going to. She was a very, very funny person, and she was very, very much into the whole tarot thing.
Oh boy.
And she'd read my mom's cards, and she'd go and stuff like that. And when I was little, I used to say, you know, someone would ask me to do something, and I said, I can't do that. And then this woman, Miss Beverly, her name is Miss Beverly Fletcher, she'd say, Kevin, why can't you do that? And I said, well, the sun won't let me. And she said, what? She's like, why? Why won't the sun let you? And I'm like, the sun won't let me. And then I do something like bad, and they're like, Kevin, why did you do that? And I said, the sun made me do it.
Oh my God.
So Miss Beverly thought that I was in direct connection with the universe because I had this relationship with the sun.
You were touched. You're touched.
And her daughters, who I saw recently, they're like, oh, Kevin, remember the sun won't let you do it. I'm like, yeah, it freaked your mother out. Anyway.
Yeah, she doesn't mess with her son.
You were like Danny Torrance from The Shining.
Steve,
that kid's got the shine.
You're in a Broadway show called Kimberly Akimbo at the moment.
Yes.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it at this point for a couple of years, because we started off Broadway at the Atlantic Theater, and then we have been on Broadway at the Booth Theater for just over a year now.
You crossed the Rubicon from off Broadway to Broadway twice. You know, that puts you in like rarefied air.
Yeah, I'm usually an off Broadway play guy. That's most of the stuff I do that's on stage.
But usually they jettison the off Broadway actor. They're like, yeah, screw that guy. He doesn't have a following. And then they bring in some star. You made it, man. Like you originated.
I really can't believe it. I mean, I do feel like it's only the weirdest shows that I am in. I just tend to do a lot of weird shows, and shows that people are like, that's not going to make it to Broadway, and then it does.
And so you've been doing it for years. What's it like to be doing 8 shows a week, day after day? Do you start to lose your marbles a little bit? You start to be like, is there a way out? There
is something that happens in your brain after a certain amount of time of doing the same lines in the same places and the same movements and things. And I experienced this doing Hand to God, because that ran for about just under a year. And there was a scene where I had all these scenes where I had to do the dialogue of myself and the puppet. And so there was no one to save me if I went up on a line.
Or the puppet went up on a line.
I was doing this scene. It was a clip of the Who's on First routine, the Abbott and Costello Who's on First routine. And I was thinking about it too much. I wasn't just like dropping the needle on the record and letting it play like it had played every other show. You know what I mean? I was thinking, it was like 6 or 7 months into this run. I was thinking in the moment too much.
You started watching.
And not just relying on muscle memory, which at that point was a mistake. And because suddenly I couldn't remember a thing. I couldn't remember anything. And I talked to the director about it afterwards, and he was like, oh, you've been doing this for so long that the script has left your short-term memory and has been filed away in the long-term memory part of your brain. Oh. He's like, so if you think too hard about it, you won't be able to do it. You have to just do it, because it will get pulled from that more kind of subconscious part of your brain where you have known this material and lived with it for so long that that's where it resides now. He's like, but it also means that when you are senile and in the nursing home at the end of your life, you will be doing the Who's on First routine, because it will never leave you.
Oh my God.
And I have experienced that, and other actors have experienced that during Kimberly Akimbo, because we have been doing it for so long that really, you can still be present and make different choices and react to what's going on that particular night, and your other actors and the audience. You can be alive and in the moment, but there is a thing where if you think too hard about it while you're doing it, it will all go away.
That's fascinating.
This happened to Derek Jacobi. I heard this story. He told me, and many other people who were gathered at his feet, that he was doing Hamlet. He was doing this 3 or 4 year run of Hamlet, traveling all over the world. And he was in Japan, and it was like the time zone was all messed up. And he was like, it was day and night and day when it was before To Be or Not to Be that they put one of the 2 intermissions, and he was in the VOM waiting to go on. And he was like, Tom, what if I went up on this speech? Wouldn't that be hilarious? And then he kind of put that thought out of his mind. He said he went on stage, the lights came up, and he didn't know what he was doing. Like he was completely out of body, didn't know what the first line of the speech was of To Be or Not to Be. And then he said he had stage fright for 7 years. He didn't go on stage. Fortunately, he had a flourishing film career, so he could afford not to go on stage. But he, it took him a long time to get back on stage.
Wow.
So good luck if that ever happens to you again. May you have a flourishing film career.
That's great.
I was doing plays, and I was like, maybe it's time for me to stop doing plays, because I started to realize that literally every single time I walked out on stage and I'm saying my first lines, I'm like, is my zipper down? I'm convinced my zipper's down as I'm playing the scene. And then the whole scene, all I can think about, instead of, whatever it was, is my zipper's down. So I was like, I'm like, to my costume designers, I must have pants with no zippers. They must just pull up.
That's before even short-term memory kicks in.
Yeah.
That's like that's foundational primal.
All I can remember is my zipper. Or not.
I have a question for Steve. Okay, some actors love seeing their work, have no problem watching them. So I have no problem, like if I'm do something little on TV show or whatever. Some people can't stand it. Are you somebody who is going to listen to like the podcast and be like, oh, that was fun. Oh yeah, it was pretty funny there. Or are you somebody who's just like, you do it, you just it's in your rear view mirror?
You know what? I feel like it's important for me to see the things that I've done after they've been completed, and to to listen to the podcast, see how it came out, because because I have an idea of how I did, or like how I came across when it was happening. But really, it's not until it's edited and it's all finished. And so I want to see, what the people are seeing.
Right.
I want to hear what they're hearing and see how it actually came across. And I feel I'm not one of the actors that is like, oh no, I can't look at myself because all I see is the mistakes. I feel like, I do see things that I maybe would have done differently, but I need to know how it came across in order to progress. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And a follow-up question to that. Sorry, Michael, I can see you chomping at the bit, but I've asked this to a couple of the others. I'm just curious, did the show turn out like you had imagined? Like, because I mean, the writing style was what it was, and I kept trying to say during recording, I'm look, there's some like thriller music that's going to happen here.
Yeah,
it's going to be like wild and blah 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 blah. And people were looking at me like, oh, what's he talking about? How's thriller music going to happen about talking about toast? So I'm just curious. Tonally, did the series end up being in the ballpark of what you were thinking about, or didn't really?
Yeah, it was kind of more cinematic than I anticipated.
Right.
Like there's like the intro and the Foley stuff, and that I knew was going to be there, that I knew was going to kind of give it a sheen, like a polish, right? But yeah, it felt really cinematic in a way. Like it felt like a movie.
Yeah.
It felt like it was scored, and it everything was like kind of bolstering the narrative, and
Right.
and yeah, that was surprising.
Before we cross into having to pay you golden overtime, we got to say goodbye, but it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and hearing all about your wide-ranging experiences as a human on this planet. It's such a gift for us that you were part of this. You really are ours. I mean, you made a huge difference. You were the difference maker in so many respects, just in terms of the ear candy of this series. I know I think Kevin feels the same. Kevin, do you like Steve?
I do. I love Steve. He doesn't know it, but
You can be honest.
We actually
Okay.
we both have we're really like fanboys.
I know.
Yeah, man
Yeah.
crushes.
This isn't going to be aired anywhere, is it? This
No,
is
it
just for
isn't.
you.
Actually, it's just for me, and we take it home and
We're not
listen
even
to it
recording it.
at night.
You're
Right.
just taking screenshots the whole time.
Yeah.
That's it. Steve Boyer, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you miss him on Broadway, if you missed Hand of God, don't worry. Wait around a few decades. You can see him at a nursing home in his dementia making puppets fuck. Yes, you've been listening to the bonus content series for In the Cards. You can learn more about In the Cards at Next Chapter Podcast website, ncpodcast.com. That's N as in next, C as in chapter, podcast with an S at the end. Hey, an S is in your future. It's true. You can find other Play On podcast series there and interviews along with talk podcasts like The 500, Indecent with Kiki Anderson, Beef with Bridget Todd, the award-winning Play On podcast series that Steve Boyer is in, playing Pistol and Henry V. Go listen. It's really, really good. And a whole lot more. I'd like to thank Jeremiah Tittle, the founder of Next Chapter Podcast, my partner in crime, and my producer, Pete Musto. Our audio engineer, editor, and sound designer is Justin Cortez. Be sure to subscribe to Next Chapter Podcast for updates on all the latest content. And don't forget to rate and review our shows, right, Steve?
That's right.
Rate and
5
review our
stars.
shows. 5 stars for Steve Boyer and In the Cards. I'm Michael Goodfriend. And
I'm Kevin Henderson.
we look forward to sharing more incredible works with you, along with lots of enlightening bonus content.